Feiler.
Welcome to.
Yeah,
Good to be here.
Another speech, and yeah, we're happy to be here today to present to the board. Thank you, board members, for having us come to present today. I'd like to thank the people of Junction City and Trinity County in general for having that meeting. It was an effort to put that together, and it was a great turnout, and that's appreciated. I'd like to also thank the people of Hayfork who allowed us to come and do an enrollment clinic up in Hayfork, particularly the fairgrounds out there for putting us up in the building there for us to have a space to be able to do that in. It's really appreciated, and also a lot of the local entities, local agencies that are out here doing a lot of good work on this issue as well. It's a complicated issue that's has a long history, and it's great to see that everybody's wanting to move this forward. So with that, start. Like I said, my name's McIntee, and I'm here with Stormer Feiler. We're going to present to you today on a regulatory program for waste discharges resulting from cannabis cultivation and associated activities. It's a mouthful, but it kind of gets to the heart of what we're talking about. So I want to go, this is the introduction. I want to talk a little bit today about our regulatory authority, a little bit of the history about how we became involved in this issue, where Stormer will kind of talk a little bit more about that. He was on the forefront of a lot of that effort, including the enforcement response that we had to that. Talk a little bit about case history specifically, and then I want to get into the statewide effort in the regulatory program that we've been developing over the last year, and kind of talk a little bit about how we're implementing it and what the structure of that program is. So our regulatory authority comes from the Federal Clean Water Act and the Porter-Cologne Water Quality Control Act. Those were passed in concert in 1969, 1971. The state level was the Porter-Cologne Act, and the Federal Clean Water Act was at the federal level. And that jurisdiction or authority that's been granted to our agency is to ensure that beneficial uses of water are being met, that water quality is not being degraded, and the mission at the bottom there is to preserve, enhance, and restore the beneficial uses of water. Under that authority that we have, we implement it through regulatory programs. We look at issues of non-point source and point source pollution. Point source pollution, for example, is something like a wastewater treatment facility, where we can point to the source of the pollution, and we can create effluent limits from for which they standards that they have to meet as the water is leaving the wastewater treatment facility going out into the watersheds. Non-point source pollution is something that's more akin to agriculture. Timber, we regulate the timber industry. They're a non-point source, and so we look for things like road construction that can create sedimentation, sediment moving off of the roads, and we look for issues like that. Nutrient management as well. There's nutrient runoff can happen as well and create some issues that you may be well aware of, like algal blooms and other things like that. The way that we kind of keep track of waters and how they're doing is we look for total maximum daily loads, and we list impaired waters through a 303D listing, and so we can assess what's going on in a particular watershed and determine if it's impaired or not and what it's impaired for, and then we can write what we believe should be the limitations for what kinds of effluents would go into that the watershed can handle. So these are total maximum daily loads for sediment and for nutrients. One of the major issues on the North Coast is sediment. A lot of the water bodies are impaired for sediment. It comes from a lot of road construction, from past practices on the landscape. In rural lands like this, there's a lot of road construction to get places, and so that's a common issue that we find on the land, and it's a common water quality impact that we see on the North Coast. So our enforcement, I just kind of want to talk generally about our enforcement framework. We have an administrative, a civil, and criminal enforcement structure. Primarily, we work in administrative and civil enforcement, where we can use regulatory tools like prohibitions and waste discharge requirements. And other types of like MPDS permits is that's like permits for wastewater treatment facilities, to set up parameters, and we expect that people follow those parameters, and entities, industries follow those parameters that are set forth, and there are fines associated if you do not meet those standards and set forth, and if you're not in any part of a regulatory framework specifically in it, we still have general authority that we can enact as well. So just kind of want to get into more of the specifics on cannabis cultivation and issues that we have seen with that in the past. So we've seen illegal site and road development. We've seen diversions of streams. We've seen sediment, nutrient, fertilizer, and pesticide runoff. We've seen large quantities of household garbage and cultivation waste that end up in the water courses as well. Issues with fuel storage and containment, as well as human waste issues. So kind of want to talk about the initial response that we had here from beginning to hear some of those things, and I'm going to turn it over to Stormer for that piece of it.
So our initial response was primarily through complaints. People hear me? Am I coming through? We worked through, so the issues associated with cannabis cultivation go across a lot of different legal requirements in terms of who regulates what. So there's county problems, there's state problems, and there's federal problems in the laws that we find. So we use task forces to get at this issue, and through that we referred our complaints to these task forces at the local county level. We called them environmental crimes task forces. Basically, it's the Regional Water Board, Fish and Wildlife, CAL FIRE, Division of Water Rights, County Environmental Health and Code Enforcement, and the Air Quality Management Districts. We would get together and we would go assess sites when we got a complaint about something. That's kind of how we started looking at these. And from there, we started looking at, we're going to show you some of what we saw, which brings to the point that something needed to happen in terms of how do we get at this, because there's so many sites out there that are being developed, and we don't really have that many people to deal with all that. So we needed a regulatory program, which is where Connor's going to get it in the end. Basically, we had to develop something to deal with the issue. This is some of what we saw. This is road construction next to a fish-bearing stream. This was a task force investigation. It was prosecuted by a circuit prosecutor in Mendocino County. It was a successful prosecution, and the site was cleaned up and restored. At this site, what's interesting is when you have really bad road construction, it concentrates all your surface flow. We had 1/10 of an inch of rain on this day, and this water was running down this road and discharging into the creek in the next picture. Right here, you can see the discharge, and that's just 1/10 of an inch of rain caused that on a poorly constructed road that wasn't drained properly. So those are some of the problems we're trying to correct with our program and through our enforcement efforts as well. This is before quarter remediation and then after it, so you can see the change. We got it fixed. It took us some work. We had to go to court, but we were successful. Takes a lot of work though to do enforcement. Regulatory program probably gets us there faster if people want to come into compliance. That's our approach right now. Site 2, large-scale grading to install cargo containers. This was a 12-acre site. 6 acres were completely cleared and graded in 2 months. The gentleman ran his Caterpillar tractor day and night, basically, that he had rented to just drive all around his property and push dirt. He actually buried one Caterpillar tractor that he broke down. He just pushed dirt over the top of it. So, he was installing cargo containers. We think to grow marijuana, he was running electrical conduit to them. And then winter always comes on the North Coast. This was Mendocino County again. And this property just basically turned into big mud puddles, mudslides everywhere. He had buried 3 streams, so he had all these drainage areas underneath there that were just completely full of mud. And this is what we got coming off the site for most of the winter. Here you can see it coming over the hay bales that were installed to try to correct the sedimentation. Just every structure that was put in was completely overwhelmed with the amount of material that moved from this site. So this one we had to actually access the cleanup and abatement account at the State Water Board and do the cleanup ourselves because the gentleman filed bankruptcy and sort of left us hanging with this mess. So the first winter you can see that there was really no control on the sediment coming off the site. The second winter, we restored it, you can see the creek's running clear. So it takes a lot of work, but you can get these sites fixed. That's what we want to do. So this is site 3. This person was recreational bulldozing. Perhaps he's trying to build a pond in the creek. We're not sure what he was doing. He got the cat stuck sideways. The diesel spilled out on top of all the dirt he pushed in the creek. So this is what we're trying to avoid. This is what we've seen and what we don't want to see happen again. This is a transport of native potting soils into the stream. So you can see the vermiculite kind of in the picture. That's how we know that there's nutrients are leaving sites because everybody's got their potting soils out there. A lot of them have vermiculite in it because vermiculite holds water, so you can have a better water use through the summer. But it also shows up in your floodplain. Vermiculite floats, and when you get a flood water, the water will push out into the floodplain where the grass and stuff is, and that vermiculite gets caught and settles there when the water drops back down. So we can see that this stuff's moving in the environment because we're finding vermiculite all along our streams. It's back to Connor now.
Yeah. So that's just kind of giving you an idea of some of the issues that we saw and still see out on the land. And so, like Stormer said, we don't have an unlimited amount of resources to be able to go through and do enforcement on all of that. And so we are trying to work to develop a regulatory framework to bring some structure for, those who want to work within this system to be able to come into compliance. And so I'm going to talk now about our regulatory framework that we've begun to enact here. Talk a little bit about the strategy. Sorry, getting a little close there. So in 2014, kind of on the heels of a lot of those cases, got together, outside of that task force with all of these agencies to begin to coordinate to figure something out about how we can make progress here. So we have a very strong partnership with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. They've been at the forefront of this issue and have been a great partner for us as we move forward with this. We also are working with counties. This is an example of that. Cities and other agencies. We work we wanted to develop this 4-pronged approach to doing this, and so that's why there's all 4 of these on this slide. We also have a component of education and outreach, which is like this presentation. We're doing enrollment workshops, so going out doing what we did in Trinity or in Junction City, excuse me, and also in Hayfork, things like that, to talk to people in a meeting forum or one-on-one. And then we do pre-consultations, so we go out onto folks that are asking for us to have inspections if they have some specific questions or they want us to take a look at something. So we're scheduling those with people that want to come forward and have a full understanding as to what's going on in their specific sites. And we have a regulatory program that's developed. Our order is in effect now. It became in effect on August 13th of 2015. And it's order number R1, which is for Region 1. That's our region is Region 1, 2015 and 0023. Region 5, which is the Central Valley region, has also passed a regulatory order as well that's very similar to this. There are slight differences. We operate, autonomously, semi-autonomously at least. And so theirs has very similar components, but it's not exactly the same. And theirs is also currently in effect right now. And then we do enforcement. And the way that we do enforcement is we do aerial review. We are using all the technological tools that we have at our capabilities to be able to understand the scope of the problem, We are developing different types of models, technological models, to understand where the areas are of highest risk. And that is including density of cultivation area, but also sensitive habitat for different species. And so we can overlay different layers from different agencies and begin to really hone in and understand where we should really focus our efforts on, where we can make the most improvements, and where can there be the most ecological environmental benefit from the regulatory program that we have here. We're prioritizing watersheds in that manner as well. That's pretty much the thing. We look at individual people's properties, but we also look at a property as a watershed. That's kind of how I really see the ultimate property line, is what's your watershed boundary, and then there's different scales of that. You've got your Browns Creek watershed, you've got your Indian Creek watershed, and then you've got your Trinity River watershed, you got your South Fork watershed, main stem, and so you can kind of expand out from there. And so we're focusing in at different levels to understand different problems at those different levels. And we do ongoing inspections. We do consent-based inspections, and we do warrant-based inspections as well if they're merited. We can go through a process to obtain a warrant to be able to come onto individuals' land that we believe that there's an issue on. And I'll get into this more, but the point of our regulatory program is to have it be consent inspections, to go through that process. If there's going to be inspections, it'll be mutually agreeable, so that we can move forward in that manner, in a civil manner. So kind of getting into a little bit of the details of the order. It's a general waiver of waste discharge requirements. That's how we implement our authority. We go through creating waivers. It's actually not really, you're not waiving anything, but it's a general order, so that we can kind of, in a general sense, allow people to have a structure, knowing that there are site-specific issues on everybody's particular sites, but we wanted to develop general parameters. The other way that we can do this is develop individual orders, but there's many different people that are doing this, and to develop an individual order for everybody takes a lot of time to be able to do that, and so we made it into a general waiver. It was adopted on August 13th, 2015. It applies to any marijuana cultivation over 2,000 square feet, or where there is a potential for discharge of waste. So even if you're cultivating under 2,000 square feet, or you're not necessarily cultivating just cannabis, you may be still required to enroll in this program if we see that there's a potential for a discharge of waste, if we see that there's a potential for environmental impacts. In some cases, it applies to indoor cultivation. It's geared towards outdoor cultivation, but oftentimes people that are cultivating indoors, it's more of something that's further south in our region, and people are oftentimes on municipal systems, and so they go through the wastewater treatment facility effluent limits, and so oftentimes they wouldn't necessarily fall under this, because we have a different mechanism to be able to keep track of pollution that way. But if you are cultivating indoors and you have discharge directly onto land that might end up in a creek, then there's a potential that you would need to also enroll in this as well.
The 2,000 square feet, is that a canopy size, or is that land measurement?
So that'd be, we look at disturbance, so land disturbance. It'd be the perimeter of where your cultivation area is from a land disturbance point of view, as opposed to canopy. Yeah. So our order components, we have the waiver, which is the details of the order I'm going to get to again in just a minute. We have a monitoring and reporting program. We have best management practices guidelines, and then we went through a CEQA analysis and have a mitigated negative declaration for that. So the general waiver, it's a property-wide coverage, so we're looking at, once you're enrolled, we're looking to cover the entirety of the property, not just what the specific area of cultivation, but all of the property. There are a series of standard conditions that need to be met. Those conditions include having properly constructed roads, including stream crossings, properly sized crossings, if you have culverts or there's a bridge that's constructed properly, all of that. The closer that you get to anything dealing with the water courses is we begin to pay more attention to that. So roads are a big issue. Nutrient management, we want to see that nutrients are being stored properly, they're being applied at proper rates, agronomic rates. So it's roads, nutrients, sorry, it's a lot. I'm blanking. So it's roads, nutrient management, human waste is another issue that we're looking at. We want to just make sure that you're in compliance with local standards. We have a on-site wastewater treatment systems policy as well that generally leans towards wanting compliance through local standards at that level. We're looking at cultivation wastes as well, the proper management of that they're not being side-cast into creeks, especially your soil that you might have, so soil spoils. Spoils from any kind of construction that you might be doing, that's managed properly as well. So you're not, as you're constructing roads, you're not just side casting the material from the construction of the road off the side, and that ends up in watersheds. So it's looking at all of those parameters. We have a tiered enrollment relative to water quality threats. So if you're a low threat to water quality, you would fall into tier 1. And I'm going to explain the tiers in more detail. If you're tier 2 is a water quality management tier. It's where you might have some issues, and we're going to work with you to fix those issues over time to get you into full compliance with all the standard conditions. And then tier 3 is a cleanup tier. That's where there's more of an immediate threat, and we feel as though that requires more specialized attention, more immediate attention on our end. And it's still a tier where we're trying to get things cleaned up, and you can still eventually come into compliance with standard conditions. So we've set it up in a way to where you can fluidly move through the tier structure and system, so that you may come in as a tier 3 if you have some major issues. As you're working to fix those issues, we're keeping track of all of that, and then once those issues are fixed, you'd be able to move into the other categories. We also have a framework for third-party programs. Our third parties are still a little bit in development. We have one current certified third party, and they're there to help implement our program. We're trying to partner with as many different entities as possible, and so having third-party programs is really good to help with that implementation. Many of them that are coming in to wanting to be third parties are consulting firms. So we're looking at people who have technical expertise, like geologists, engineers, registered professional foresters, to come in and have a program that we feel as though they can be implementing our order, helping us to implement that order. There's been concern of individuals of their privacy, just given the nature and the history of this industry, and so we wanted to allow individuals who didn't want to work directly with us to be able to work through a third party, and some of the sensitive information, site information can be kept with third-party programs as opposed to being submitted directly to us. We have an auditing process that we'll go through with third-party entities as well to ensure that they are implementing the order as up to the standards that we're requiring them to. So in any agreement that we come to with third parties includes an auditing process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the tiers here. So in tier 1, if you want to be in tier 1, you must have full compliance with standard conditions, which I mentioned earlier: roads and nutrient management, waste management. You have to cultivate less than 5,000 square feet of cultivation area. You must be at least 200 feet away from any type of water course. That's a fish-bearing stream, a class 1 stream. That's a class 2 stream, which flows 6 months out of the year. It's a class 3 stream that has, during storm events, that'll be flowing. So any of those, you just have to be 200 feet, at least 200 feet away from in your cultivation area, as well as wetlands. You have to be cultivating on less than 35% slope, and that's because the steeper that you're cultivating on, the more likely it is that there can be, runoff issues, and so that's something that we keep track of as well as when you're cultivating on slopes. You also have to not divert surface water from May 15th to October 31st. So in the period of low flows over the course of the summertime, we want to make sure that there's still good water in the streams for fish in a way that we can do that is just not taking water out in that during those months. So we are encouraging people to have storage capacity, or use other means from not diverting surface water. Rainwater catchment is a great thing to do. It's a great way to have storage. And then people have wells as well that they'll use, and so that's another way to not divert surface water.
I'd like to go into this part a little more. So even if you have legal, say you're farming alfalfa, you got legal access to surface water, you can go out there, flood irrigate your field. You're saying if you're also growing marijuana, you have to contain that and take no surface water from marijuana.
If you would like to be in tier 1, so it's just tier 1. That's the low threat to water
so you
quality.
have to be in tier 2.
Right, you cannot be in tier 1 we're not saying that you can't be in the program, but you cannot be considered a low threat to water quality if you are diverting surface water from May 15th to October 31st.
So something you didn't touch on too is you need to have a valid water right as well.
So for tier 2, which requires a water resource protection plan, we're looking for you in that water resource protection plan to have best management practices developed. There's going to be some additional reporting that's going to be required, and it can include compliance time schedules. The compliance time schedule piece of it would be, say you've got like 3 or 4 culverts that you need to fix because you've got a bunch of stream crossings. So we want you to fix culverts 1 and 3 on year 1 because those are the higher priorities, and then we want you to fix culverts 2 and 4 in year 2. So we're trying to work with people over time to be able to fix, the issues. We know that you're not going to be able to fix everything all at once. We know that it costs, there are costs associated with doing those fixes, and so we're working with people to have a compliance time schedule. The schedule, we're looking at a potential up to 5 years of a time schedule. If you've only got 1 culvert to fix, we would like you to not fix it at year 5, right? You might want to think about fixing that in year 1 because it's the only one that you got. But if you have multiple issues, we're going to work over time to help get those issues resolved. The riparian buffers begin to change in tier 2. We still want you to be 200 feet away from a class 1 stream, a fish-bearing stream. Class 2 stream, you can be up to 100 feet away, and a class 3 stream, you can be 50 feet away. We went through a synthesis of about 54, 55 different studies, focused a lot on the North Coast, but also across the country about different impacts to water courses based on a variety of factors and how far away you need to be in a riparian area. A lot of that protection had to do with nutrients and habitat for not only fish but for amphibians as well. And when you start talking about amphibians, there's a couple of studies that get out to like 600 or 700 feet away because they'll use kind of backwater refugia as well, floodplain, things like that, disconnected oxbows and other things like that, if you're to where they'll have habitat. And so we went through that, kind of synthesized it, and came to an understanding of what we thought were good levels for that. That being said, if you are closer than any of those, you can request that an exception, and through your management practices that you have, you're going to have to lay all of those out in your water resource protection plan. But we may be, willing to allow in certain circumstances slightly closer than that limitation. Based on site-specific things. There's one that I was just at in Mendocino where a guy was about 40 feet away from a class 3. So he's just a little bit closer, but he's got this wetland area that is away from anything that he's doing, and we're working with him to potentially be able to, mitigate his 10 feet closer by allowing that wetland to come back a little bit more. So, if you have different site-specific things like that, we're just looking for general improvement from the current situation to be able to do things. And so if there's, that's site-specific negotiation that we're looking at. That's just a particular instance.
On your best management practices here, you might have third-party people verifying these best management practices. So you might have somebody like Mark Lancaster's group or a local group, like the Northwest Resource Conservation Group. Is that, I understand you only have one person so far that's certified to do that, but you intend to have local people?
Correct. Well, it's half up to us as to who we're approving, and it's half up to who's putting in applications to come in to want to do that. And right now, I don't believe that we have any formal applications from anyone in Trinity County. But we do have, we're working on it. We are in discussion with a lot of these other firms and entities, nonprofit entities. There's a lot of varied interest to wanting to be third parties. And we would like to see as many people who feel as though they're qualified and want to be able to do this kind of work to come in and work with us to develop those programs. We don't have a limitation on how many we'll accept, but we do have a really rigorous approval process because we have these standards that we may need to make sure that are being met. A lot of firms are really good firms out. There's a lot of great consulting firms, good foresters, good nonprofit entities that have lots of different levels and different kinds of experience that they'd be able to implement this very well. And it's also not required that you work through a third party. If you're a cultivator, you don't have to feel as though you have to go through one of those people. We wrote this in a way that, and we feel, folks on the North Coast are do-it-themselves people. And there's some simple things with just a little bit of education on that you can do a lot of this yourself. And so that's what a lot of this has been structured for. That's why we have an extensive best management practices manual, with tons of other resources for you guys to be able to research, to be able to make a lot of those small changes on your own. If you got some of the bigger technical things, that's when we're starting to look for you to go find an engineer to be able to help you engineer a road crossing that might be beyond what your comfort level is to be able to do properly, because we are expecting that it's done properly. So if you are in full compliance with all of the standard conditions, but you're doing everything right, but you're slightly larger than 5,000 square feet, so you want to be able to cultivate a little bit more, but you're doing everything right. We allow for a tier 2 star category, which is 10,000 square feet or less. So you can have a tier 2 star, and that's basically a fee thing. So if you are in tier 2, we're still expecting that you do a water resource protection plan, and making sure that you're compliant with everything that we're asking you to be compliant for. But we understand that you're being a good steward of the land, and we don't need to charge you an extra amount of money for the slightly larger workload that we have. So up to 10,000 square feet, you can be a tier 2 star, and you would pay a tier 1 fee level. And this tier, so if you want to be diverting in the summertime, you need to show that your diversion is not negatively impacting the watershed. And so that can be done through a variety of manners. You're coming together with everybody who's drawing water from that watershed, so that you guys are coming up with a pumping schedule, so that you know that you're pumping here and they're pumping then, so that way everybody has enough water, there's still enough flow for the fish to maintain for that. So it's just asking people to come together, find good creative ways to be able to ensure that the water's resource is being protected. So there's not saying that you can't divert throughout the summer, but we need to make sure that streams aren't going completely dry as a result of these activities. Tier 3 sites is for sites that require immediate action. It requires a cleanup and restoration plan. this you cannot go through a third party with. You can, at least not in the way that you can't. We're still going to get all the information for this. Is what I guess what I'm trying to say. You're likely going to need to have a consulting firm or something like that to develop these cleanup and restoration plans. That's where we see larger issues. We need them to be corrected right away. And we need these plans, technical plans, to be developed to be able to do this. If you're also going to cultivate, tier 2 requirements also apply. So you still have to do all of this, meet as much of the standard conditions as you can while you're cleaning everything up, and doing your water resource protection plan. Tier 3 cleanup and restoration plan is kind of an emergency water resource protection plan, but it still allows you while you're cleaning up the site, it still allows you to continue to cultivate, because we understand that people, it's difficult if you can't do the thing that it is that you've been doing out there to be able to clean up your site, because we know that it costs money to be able to clean up your site. So you can still continue to cultivate even though you have some things that you need to clean up. Deadlines, there's an enrollment, the enrollment deadline was initially January 1st and we extended it to February 15th. We are getting third-party programs approved. We are doing enrollment workshops. That's what's going on right now. The water resource, so you enroll, the way that you enroll, I actually have forms back there. They're notice of intents and a monitoring and reporting program. So we want both of those filled out. Basically, the monitoring and reporting program is this round. By the first time that you enroll, is going to be for you to be making your site map, figuring out what the issues that may be on your property, identifying them, and just giving some of the really basic information, like what's your square footage of cultivation, what's your, where is your water source that you're drawing from, and how much are you drawing from it, more or less. Just general things like that, that we're asking you to submit along with your enrollment and your fee. Once those 3 things are submitted, then you're considered to have be enrolled in the program. Once you're enrolled in the program, you have 180 days to develop a water resource protection plan, 6 months. So we understand that there's going to be a variety of things that you might find. The first time that you look at it, it's going to be the first assessment that you make. Then you got 6 months to figure out how you're going to make it right. And we expect that comes in then 180 days later. The cleanup and restoration plan, so if you are a tier 3 site, you got 45 days to do the cleanup and restoration plan. So you kind of see how we're shrinking the time frame down for that. That's more of an emergency thing. That's a bigger issue, and so we want it to get taken care of sooner. The activities that we're doing from the day that it was adopted through February 15th, we've got a web page that's up. That's also in that package, the enrollment form package over there. There's a little fact sheet that has the website on it too, for anybody that wants to go and look there. There's third-party guidance and proposal review and approval of third parties that we're in the middle of right now. We're preparing for automated enrollment, trying to get an online enrollment system enacted. In the meantime, those enrollment forms serve. You can either mail them in directly to us, or you can PDF them and email them as well. We're notifying property owners in the region. This is something that I haven't noted yet, and it's important that I note. This applies only to private lands. Cultivation on public lands is not part of this program. It's never going to be part of this program. So that's important that I state that. We're doing pre-enrollment consultation, so that's both in the desktop and the field. We're doing the workshop in the afternoon for one-on-one consults. We're going out and doing site inspections, and then for recalcitrant landowners, we're reviewing aerial imagery. We're sending letters to landowners. We will assess a fee and give a compliance deadline if they're not coming in through the front door. So we can assess fees and fines for people that aren't coming in just without having to set foot on the property, just because we have this order. You need to enroll and comply in this order, and if you don't, we're gonna catch up with you eventually. If that's not appealed or paid, enforcement can increase from there. You know, we may visit the site and look for water quality issues that are on the site, and if we find those, we have penalties that we can assess that way, and those penalties can range up to $10,000 a day for penalties. So the take home, the order is in effect. It does not authorize cultivation of cannabis. What it does is it authorizes the waste discharges resulting from cannabis cultivation. This doesn't supersede or preclude the need to comply with all other applicable laws and regulations. We're hoping to partner with cities and counties, municipalities. We're requiring water conservation and use reporting. We're doing enforcement and compliance assistance, and we're also looking for, you know, I kind of alluded to this a little bit when you were asking about surface water diversions, and we're looking for sub-watershed reporting as well. So if you go through a third party, we're gonna lump you in as part of a sub-watershed. That's, you know, your Browns Creek area. So if you don't wanna be marked individually, you go through the third party, and we're gonna begin to aggregate this data at a sub-watershed level so that we can begin to understand what's going on, you know, at a watershed level. So this is just a couple photos at the end. This is some well-sited storage tanks. This is in the eastern Humboldt area, and then this is just a view of a fairly well-structured and thought-out operation. So I'll take questions at this time.
So I have two. If you're over the 10,000 square foot number, I didn't see, are you still in the second tier, but just have to pay more? Is that?
Correct.
Okay.
And even if you're under 10,000, you still might be in tier 2, just regular tier 2. You gotta comply with all the conditions if you want it to be in tier 2 star.
Okay.
Right.
So tier 2 star, you still have to comply, basically.
Yeah, and regular tier 2, you're still complying, but you might just be larger than 10,000 square feet.
Okay, and secondly, obviously this is a black market industry that you're trying to make legitimate. To the February 15th date, you know, if we get 10 or 15%, that's probably gonna be a good number of people to sign. What are you gonna do come August to try to get people still signing in? What backup is there to still try to bring people in the fold?
So we're going to continue to be doing enforcement as we need to, and we're going to also continue to do education and outreach.
So are you just gonna automatically find somebody, or is there gonna be a process to bring them in, or just on an individual basis?
We won't necessarily catch up to everybody that decides to not enroll right at February 15th. We're going to catch up to some of you, and some of you, you know, might not, and so maybe you'll still 6 months later be able to just waltz in through the front door. Maybe you won't. Maybe 6 months later we're going to catch up with you and find that you're not doing the things that you need to be doing. And so, you know, the more people that come into enrollment, the easier it's going to be for us to find the people that aren't doing the things that they should be doing. And so it's, you know, we're going at it both angles. So we're going to continue to do enforcement over time, and we know that we're not going to be able to catch everybody, so we're going to still keep getting people in as we can.
Thank you.
Well, to expand a little bit on that water right and water use, I mean, of course, your agency's known to find big fines. I mean, water quality, when you have bad water, like a sewage treatment plant dumping into a river, there's $100,000 fines. So I mean, so I think the grower community should know that if things are done poorly, you guys will be there and enforcing at a decent level.
So